Okay, Frank, we're live. Thanks for joining me this evening. Friday evening, I'll add. So definitely appreciate you doing this. I'm going to give the floor to you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Maybe just a high level background of your career and where you are today and about the company you founded and are currently running.
Sure. Well, Connor, great to be here with you. I love talking about this stuff, both as how you get to a place in life and the journey behind it, but also the aspects of deciding to be an entrepreneur. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat. So, Frank, my name is Frank Ricciardi. I have been a technology, lifelong in technology. Started in consulting in 1999, jumped ship out of consulting and caught the internet wave because that's what you had to do. And I happened to be lucky to live in San Francisco at the time. And so there were no shortage of internet companies to go work for, um, where we all had jobs that had new titles and
Mhm.
we all had these crazy valuations and we were doing, as you know, I don't have to tell everybody the story about what that time was like and then the bubble hit. But I was lucky enough to work for very successful companies during that time, and companies that I thought were really doing leading things at that time in their field. And my last, so I've been in the internet, software delivered over the internet before we
Yeah.
called it cloud software or SaaS software, for most of my career. My last really long run was with a company called Cornerstone On Demand, which is an HR technology, talent management, people technology company. And I was there for 13 years. I was part of the original executive team. When I started at that company, I was the 26th employee, which is double my lucky number of 13. So I thought, yeah, that's a good sign. Um, and we were doing about maybe a $500,000 in annual recurring revenue. And when
Okay.
I left 13 years later, we were doing a $500 million in annual recurring revenue. And I had maybe four careers inside that company, not just four jobs, but four literal careers inside that company over those 13 years. The last of which, well, I'll quickly tell you, the first half of it was really building out all of the customer capabilities to ensure that customers were successful in a software as a service environment. Because if you think about technology back then, people using software in the enterprise, 100% of our clients were moving from on premise software to
Yeah.
software as a service. So they were not ready for that transition. So part of that journey was being learning how to create capabilities to not only technically and operationally support those customers, but also how to emotionally support them, to be quite
Yeah.
honest,
Yeah.
because it was a big shift. And so I spent the first half of my time there building the customer capabilities, which turned out to be 7 capabilities. Essentially, I was responsible for retention and growth of the customer portfolio. I was tapped by my boss at the time, who was the CEO and founder of the company, to go start our business in Asia Pacific. So I always
Mhm.
say the way I describe it is I was given a charter and a bag of money, meaning a budget, and an
Yeah.
airline ticket. And so I went and moved to Hong Kong, and
Wow.
we started the business in 7 countries, all at the same time. I was employee number one. By the time I left that 5.5, 6 years later, that role, we were about 100 employees. We were operating in 8 countries, and they were completely independent, and we had grown the business in markets that were not Western, you know. And so
Mhm.
it was every market was a learning, not only a learning experience, but a an exercise in um, culture and exercise in learning about yourself within a culture and how to how to assimilate and really be successful in a place that you're not used to. So I learned more about myself than I did about business during that time, to be quite honest. And then I left that role, came back to America, became the chief customer officer of that company. We took that company public, by the way, in
Hmm.
2011, which was quite a ride. And then I left. I took a couple years off and I started my own company. And here we are in also a software as a service company. I actually call it service as a software, but that's a
Hmm.
whole other discussion. And it's in the well-being space.
Yeah, and so maybe we can get into your current company in a bit, but I think there's some more to unpack there on Cornerstone on Demand. I mean, you essentially grew the company and took it public and went into another country. I mean, can you add any additional context as to what that was like from your experience and what it takes to grow and succeed with such a rapidly scaling technology company? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, my beard and hair are gray
Yeah.
because of that experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And so, if you could imagine a company that, when I started, they were a startup, or they were a couple years old, but essentially a startup. There were only 26 people working for the company, and you know, the constant optimization of the business to figure out how do you well look, I mean, we were trying to prove product market fit,
Hmm.
and so people think product market fit means I can sell it, but that's actually only half of the equation. Product market fit really means you can sell it and you can keep the customer.
Yeah.
And so it was an exercise, because I was responsible for all things customer. It was really an exercise in listening to the customer. Everyone says that, but what does it mean? And so, as you scale the company, it gets harder and harder and harder to listen at scale. It's easy to listen when you have 10 customers.
Hmm.
But when you have, when I left my role to go to Asia, we had 2,500 customers and 10.5 million users. And so it
Yeah.
gets harder to listen. I call it intimacy at scale. How do you create intimacy when you have that many customers? But that journey was really it was about a constant exercise of finding ways to listen and to advance the product in a way that met the most amount of need possible. So it's one thing to listen to one customer, but you really have to, in a SaaS company, listen to all the customers and then decide, how do you meet the most need? Because remember, software as a service is configurable, not customizable, right? So all of these people, all of these new clients were coming from well, we can customize the hell out of anything we want because it's on premise. But now we're saying, hey, we have to build a solution that is meeting the needs and of everyone. And we build it
Hmm.
in a way that's configurable so that you can customize, they use the word customize, but you can configure it to meet your needs. And so, it's an exercise in really retraining the customer on how to be successful in that environment. And what emerged, Connor, was the concept of client success. So, two
Hmm.
things I want to say there. Cornerstone, in many ways, was a pioneer in what today is called client success. We put
Hmm.
processes in place. We built frameworks for helping customers to be successful. And we really became known for being a pioneer in that space. But client success is a very interesting concept, because you really have to understand not what the company needs to be successful. You really have to commit to understanding what the client needs to be successful. And companies that don't get that don't do client success right. And
Hmm.
so, if you can get that equation right, then you will find that you are above the average baseline of net revenue retention for sure. And scaling that is what the where the real nuance is. And the second part of the story was, when one of the reasons we really got client success right is because when we said we're going to take the company public, which we always knew we wanted to do, when the rubber really met the road, we went to our client advisory board and our clients and we said, hey, so excited, by the way, hey, we're taking the company public. And our
Mm-hmm.
client advisory board was like, whoa, why? And we were like, what are you talking about? Like, of course, because we want to grow the company. And they said, and you know what? Surprisingly, their reasoning was, by taking the company public, you will lose focus on us, which was exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. It is very disruptive to go public and
Yeah.
prepare for an IPO. And then it's disruptive post IPO when all of a sudden you have a shitload of money in the bank and you're investing it in growth, right? And so what we did, in my opinion, correctly, is we said our strategy is to ensure our customers are not disrupted by the IPO. And that is where we really invested in creating frameworks and teams to make sure that we didn't lose contact and intimacy with the customer.
Can you expand on that a bit? Right. You're the chief customer officer. You have thousands of customers. You have hundreds of employees, I'm assuming. How do you ensure that consistency stays in place from a client success perspective?
We invented something, actually. So when we asked ourselves the question, how do we go public and not disrupt the client relationship and their ability to be successful? We talked to our customers. We talked to our board of customer advisory board. We talked to the market. We talked to analysts in the market who were covering our space. And what emerged from that was something that we invented that we called the client success framework. And it was literally a set of learnings from all of that data collection and research that outlined the journey that a customer would go through with us, from selling, we called that discovery, from buying, which is obviously the after you buy, the first phase is implementing.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we mostly discovered was what happens after you're implemented. That's where the real rubber meets the road, because SaaS model is dependent on annual recurring revenue that lasts for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing you might expect that the next phase is like manage the customer. But what we discovered was that the next phase was a very short phase that no one was thinking about. And we called it incubation. And incubation was about that immediate post-live environment where everybody's exposed. The customer's exposed. They may have rolled out to 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 people, and they're basically their job's on the line, if things don't go well.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the most issues, right? In that immediate, like, things don't work all the time perfectly. In the first 90 days, you're constantly tweaking. And we put a special emphasis on getting through that phase as quickly as possible and resolving any issues. And they were usually configuration issues with a SWAT team. And so once we had a set of criteria for knowing when you're out of incubation. And so it's like the baby, right? The first time you have a baby, you need to like deal with the issues that you're not used to dealing with. Like if the baby wants to eat, when it wants to eat, you got to feed it. so
Yeah, yeah.
so we called that incubation, and it was a very special phase and a differentiator. And then the last phase, again, you come back to it. You might think that that last phase is managing the customer, but it's not. It's about constant optimization of the solution in the client's business over time forever. What do I mean by that? I mean, what people don't realize is that the client's business is constantly changing. And our software, SaaS software, is constantly changing. Back then, when I was doing this, we were doing 4 releases a year. Now people are doing like a release a week,
Mm.
which means there's more functionality, there's more service, there's things that people don't know about, and there are things that can make the current implementation better. So you don't need to manage the customer, you need to optimize them to make sure that they're getting the most value out of the software forever. And that requires assessment, optimization of the configuration, value realization checkpoints to make sure that you're ahead of, not behind, playing catch up like, oh, they're not happy. We better figure out what to do. You need to be constantly optimizing and validating value or ensuring value realization while it's happening. And so that framework became very differentiating for us. It became something we were known for. And it became one of the reasons that we were able to have an incredible retention rate.
Yeah. Would you say that most SaaS companies are achieving that level of client success today, or is there a lot of
Absolutely not.
okay?
Absolutely not. I mean, there's a lot of look, and this is not specific to SaaS, but there's a lot of talk out there. There's a lot of talk in the sales process about what we do and how we do it and why we're better and how we service you. And, you know, service is an interesting dilemma in SaaS because you don't want to
Mhm.
charge for service, actually, strangely,
Mm.
because it creates revenue drag on the SaaS model, meaning you have SaaS revenue that's recurring every year, you can count on it. But if you're selling service, implementation service, extra service over time, that's service that disappears every year. You only sell it one time. So yeah, your
Yeah.
revenue goes up, but you have to like go find that service and backfill it every year in order to so the most pure SaaS models have figured out ways to embed the service in the overall service offering. So it's always recurring. And so there are a lot of complexities to how you service a customer. But like I said, like any company or any industry, technology included, there's a lot of talk. And the ones that do it well are the ones that can prove it. The ones that can literally show the model. They can. It's not like, and it's not just like, oh, I need to get a good reference from a customer. Like you need to demonstrate it. And you need to be asking questions in the sales process, like what's your net revenue retention rate?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, doesn't it just come down to you talk about optimizing, just continuing to improve the product, which creates a stickiness, which kind of guarantees the retention of the client and recurring revenue?
Actually, yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but actually, I don't think that's only half of the equation. So the first half of the equation is what you've said, is listening to the customer about what they need, getting those needs at scale on the roadmap, the needs that'll meet the most amount of customers, building out the product. But the problem with SaaS is that customers are not always ready to adopt that new tech, that new feature, that new feature set,
Mm.
that new technology. So you putting it in does nothing unless you are ready to invest in them, knowing about it, understanding it, configuring it against a use case in their company, and then making sure it's working. So, do you know how many features are in a SaaS product that never get used? It's crazy. And so every 3 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever your normal terms are, you start having you start having this discussion with the customer about, well, we're not really getting the value that we want to get out of it. And so, we're not sure if we're going to we'll renew. We want to renew for 1 year. And so they're putting you on notice. And, if you are really invested upfront in making sure that they're adopting all of the innovation, because part of the value proposition of SaaS is you're taking the collective innovation, i.e., the needs of all of the customers, and you're embedding it into the product, and everybody gets it for no more cost, for free, right? For free. But, it's shelfware unless you can find a way to get them to be interested in it, find a use case for it, configure it in a live environment, and then measure it.
Would you say sometimes even pushing out new optimizations or features can hurt retention? I just think I've used Salesforce a decent amount in my career, and there's a seismic shift from Salesforce Classic to, I believe, whatever the new form of Salesforce is called, Salesforce Lightning, and you just flip it on and send it to all your customers, and they start freaking out and they say, "I don't like this. I like the way it was." I mean, how do you deal with that?
People they don't like change. People
Mm-hmm.
don't like change. And look, so it is people always, I used to get into these debates around, if you think about classic change management theory, people used to say, "Oh, you shouldn't need change management in SaaS. It just works. It's like it's in the product." Change management is not about the tech. Change management is about the human. And so you really do have to understand the cycle of change. And you have to get people, you can't just get people excited for some new feature. Like Lightning's amazing, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody's going to debate that that's not a valuable thing. But when people are used to what works, don't change it if it doesn't, it's not broken, all that kind of stuff. You have to one of the capabilities that we built, of 7 customer capabilities to make sure that we're in success. It wasn't just client success. It was account management. It was customer support. It was client success. It was client marketing, which is the change cycle. It's like, you can't tell them on the day of, like, "Oh, hey,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
amazing. You should adopt it." You have to tell them like 6 months before. And then
Mm-hmm.
your client success manager needs to get in there and make sure that they understood. Did you understand what's coming? Can we talk about it? Can we find a use case for it in your company? Would it help you? Let's find a use case to get it to help you. That's all change management. And so, enterprise SaaS. I'm not talking about Facebook. I'm talking about enterprise SaaS. you know,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but Facebook principles apply, right? You shouldn't have to. If you have to teach someone all the complexities of it all every time you release a feature, well, that's not good. That's not consumerized software.
Yeah.
But enterprises are complicated, and we went from SaaS, and you get all this innovation to, and then we went to like all these configurations that were so wacky to meet every possible business problem, and SaaS got really complicated. And then we went back to vanilla. Like, you don't need all that complication. Go back to vanilla, because it got too
Mm-hmm.
complicated for them. And now we're just kind of in the cycle again. So innovation is a complex thing. Simple innovation is a beautiful thing. The simplicity of really well done innovation is a beautiful thing. But it is still, there's still change management. There's still marketing and messaging and onboarding to be
Yeah.
done, even if they're a customer. And a lot of times, companies forget that.
Yeah. 100%. I think it's very interesting. I think you have a lot of insights, and I'm assuming the frameworks that you built around client success are making their way into your new venture. But before we get into that, I kind of want to circle back to how you went to a different continent and built up a business in a culture where you didn't know the language or have any background. And I just want to dig into that a little bit more around how you were able to pull that off and the nuances of doing that versus, working in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start by saying, and I think our founder at Cornerstone was very astute in knowing this. I remember when he asked me to go do this, he said to me, "Look, man, you're the only guy in the company who, in his email signature, has a +1 before his number." And what he was making a joke, but it was real. It was a real astute joke because he knew I was a globalist and a culturist. I'm obsessed with the world, not just
Mhm.
with America. As an American, I find my passion is dropping myself into other cultures and embedding my I never would have guessed actually that if you said, "Oh, you're going to go build a company in another country on another continent," I never would have guessed it would have been Asia. I'm a bit of a Europhile. I have a European background, and I feel deeply connected to Europe, to many places in Europe, and that's a place that feeds my soul. And so I remember, the way that it worked, the way that it went down was we had an executive search going for many months to find the general manager of Asia Pacific. And we rightly knew that we wanted to be a public company before we entered Asia, because you don't go enter Asia with like a couple people and
Yeah.
a little budget. Like if you're going to enter Asia, you got to go invest, because every country, if you go enter Europe, I'm not, everybody, Europeans speak different languages, don't get me wrong, but they're Western. There's a mindset, there's a way of doing business. There are nuances, without a doubt. You go to Asia, every country is distinctly different. When you think of Japan and you think of India, like they're at the
Yeah.
other end, they're at different ends of the spectrum. And so the founder of our company invited me to Starbucks. And I always knew when he wanted to go to Starbucks that there was something serious he wanted to talk about. And so
Okay.
I was like, God, what the hell could it be? Did we have does not like something we're doing? And anyway, the story was, hey, we've been looking for a GM of Asia Pac for a long time. We're not finding success. And I think he's like, why would we look out externally when we have someone who can do it? Which was a great compliment. And I was like, Asia, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
The next morning I was like, let's do it. I mean, I didn't have any qualms about it. I knew nothing about Asia. I was in Hong Kong once. Um, didn't have a great time, actually. Thought I was moving to Sydney,
Yeah.
because I've got a bunch of friends there, and everybody speaks English, and the Queen was there, so they're part of the Commonwealth, and I love the Brits. And then I got out the map and I drew the lines of all the places I would be responsible for, and like the shortest flight is 8 hours to Singapore, and if I was going to India or Hong Kong or Japan, it was anywhere between 12 and 14 hours. And I was like, well, that's not going to work, because I was on the road 100% of the time. I was in Hong Kong on the weekends, or at home on the weekends,
Wow.
which
Yeah.
I decided would be Hong Kong. Centrally located, under British rule for 150 years. That's not why I did it, but easy for a Westerner to kind of land. Very new business friendly, Western business friendly. New entrants. And I decided to make that my home. So we started the business. We came up with a model for creating a business entity and different and structure in each of these different places, and just went to town and started hiring people. Made a ton of mistakes, Connor. Ton of, in
Yeah.
particular, sales hire mistakes. because the psyche of a salesperson in different countries are completely different. So I'll give you an example. In Japan, which is a very risk averse culture, what is a salesperson? A salesperson is a risk taker. They say, I'm going to have a relatively, reasonable salary, but I'm going to double or triple my salary because I'm going to
Hmm.
crush it in my quota. And
Yep.
every Western salesperson is used to that. In particular, American salespeople, right? They're risk takers. People say, I'm going to give you $1. And what does an American say? I'm going to turn it into 10. A
Hmm.
Japanese salesperson says, give me $9 and I'll never lose 8 of them.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they're a culture of risk aversion. And so you had to learn all these things in order to hire well, made lots of mistakes, but we learned really quickly. Um, and we put down pods in each of the different countries, what we called the core operating pod. That was the core of what you needed to do business. Like, you don't go to Japan and say, I'm going to have a solution architect come in and demo the product to you in
Yeah.
English. That doesn't work that way. So, so we did that. And, the one thing that I will tell you is that we hired, of course, local people who had interest in Western culture. They generally spoke okay English, um,
Mhm.
so that we could communicate with them. But they had an interest in Western culture or American culture. Actually, we were an American company, um, but we hired locally, and that was really important. And it was my job to kind of navigate the the different cultures. Um, what was interesting about all cultures was that they were really interested in what the Americans had to say about technology. They considered us thought leaders in
Hmm.
SaaS and talent management and what we were selling. So they were interested in hearing what we had to say. And that was helpful, but the technology didn't often meet the people practice needs of those cultures. The way you do performance management in Japan is not the way you do performance management in America. And there was no configuration available to meet that need, right? So we also had to be ready to adopt, take some of those practices and make configurations, make workflow available to support them. So it was an exercise of starting from scratch
Yeah.
in every, maybe not in Australia and New Zealand. But so we were in Australia, New Zealand, India, Singapore, mainland China, Hong Kong, Japan, and Seoul, and
Wow.
Korea, South Korea, and it was just a constant learning experience. So, but to answer your question, it, it takes a unique person to want to and be able to navigate those those cultures. But for me, I got fired me up.
So, I mean, would you recommend it if someone out there, someone listening to this, is offered that type of opportunity? I mean, go to this faraway place and help us grow this thing. I mean, do you have any regrets looking back on it?
Look, here are the pros and cons. The pros and cons is you leave your home, you go to a new place. Success does not happen in. I thought I was going to do this for a year or two, but I'm the guy who's like, nope, didn't like we didn't get there yet. We're not there yet. So I stayed for 6.
Yeah.
So you got to be willing to, if you're doing it because you want to see the world, that's not a good
Yeah.
reason. Like, go
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
vacation. If you're doing it because you want to embed yourself in the world, go do it. You'll have the biggest learning experience of your life, both personally and professionally. But you leave your friends and family. Asia, you know, LA to Hong Kong is 13-hour flight. It's not around the corner. It's 14 time zones. So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
working on a different day. You're a day ahead. You're up at night on call. I mean, we had an executive team call every Monday night or every Monday morning in America, which was my Tuesday at midnight. And
Mhm.
they very graciously moved it an hour earlier to 8:30 to accommodate me so I could do it at 11:30 instead of midnight.
Yeah. So
So if you're
so
that
kind.
person, like, go do it. Go do it. You will learn and your emotional growth will be incredible. But it is a real commitment. It is a real
Yeah.
commitment.
To round out this topic, what was it like coming back to the United States and moving back here and restarting your life, where you grew up?
I was a different person when I came back. I had changed dramatically, interpersonally, emotionally. I moved back to LA where I was living before I left, and I found that I didn't re-engage in the same social circles. I just kind of felt like I had different interests. Not that I was like I wanted to go like hang out with all my Asian friends or like have only Asian friends in LA.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean. But I just meant like the things that I found interesting before I didn't find as interesting. LA didn't actually, to be quite honest, never really uh, grew on me. I'm back in LA here, but it never
Hmm.
really kind of like fed my soul like it did before I left.
Mm.
And you grow, and so you wonder what's next. Now, look, I'm single, and I could do, I didn't have to lug a family across the world, so I could
Yeah.
could move. That's a whole different. I can't speak to that, but that's got to be exponentially harder. But I know people
100%.
who have done it. But I feel like I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, even though I've worked for companies that existed. I've always grown them from scratch.
Yeah.
And so, it was time to do something new that was going to be my own thing. And that's kind of what got me to where we are now with the new company, Maavee.
Okay. I just one more question on working abroad for so long. What did it teach you, or the biggest lesson it taught you about the world and people? And then we'll get into Mavi.
Yeah. Empathy. And I don't mean empathy like I feel sorry for you because maybe your culture and your GDP is not as high as America's. I mean empathy meaning just this real fascinating growth that comes from having a real desire to understand where the other person is coming from. Now, this is not about living in Asia or living in Europe. This is about life. And if we could only do this in America really well at scale,
Hmm.
we'd be a different culture. Certainly the world would be different if we could all do it. But when you say you're going to put someone, you put yourself in someone's shoes when you're negotiating a contract in India
Yeah.
and understand where they come from and why they ask for what they ask for and why they want like 10 times the amount of service that any like American client would want. And I always tell this story about Japan. We were doing a deal in Japan, and I found, first of all, let me caveat it by saying I love the Japanese culture. But when I first got there, I was pulling my hair out because what do we do in America? We get to the point where somebody says, I'm buying, like I'm ready to buy.
Hmm.
Like, let's get this contract done as quickly as possible. Um, but by the way, we want the sales cycle to be as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
The Japanese they actually want the opposite. I'm not saying they want it to be as long as possible, but they want to dot every I and cross every T at every step. and it is a consensus-based society. So you have the same meeting, first you have the meeting at this level, and then the boss comes in and you have the same meeting at this level, and then the boss comes in of that boss, and then you have the same meeting at this level, and you keep going, and it's so frustrating. And what you don't realize is that you're building trust at every level, and you have to build the trust here before you can earn the right to build the trust at the next level, and then earn the right to build the trust at the next level. What happens in America? The admin comes in, the assistant comes in, the boss comes in, the CEO sometimes comes in. It's like, let's just get this done and all get on the same page.
Yep.
But so I was having one of the things we did really well in Japan was, because it was such a unique culture, I built an advisory board. So the CEO of Salesforce.com Japan was on our advisory board. The head of the Tokyo 2020 or 2020 Olympics was on our advisory board. A Japanese American guy who specialized in helping American clients to enter Japan was on our advisory board. And so we built this really interesting board. And I would go to them and be like, I don't know what's going on, because we would finally get to a contracting stage, and they would be like, this sentence, this punctuation, this, I'm like, and these are like, to us, like, not consequential.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy who was the head of Yoshi Noguchi-san, he pulled me aside and he said, look, he said, I've been doing business in Japan. He's Japanese, obviously. I've been doing business in Japan for 50 years. And I want to tell you a story. When I was selling mainframe storage, those big machines with the tapes that you can see that yeah. And he said, I forget what company he worked for, like NTT Data or an American company selling to NTT Data. And they bought 50 of these giant machines. And the 50 machines arrived and they installed them, and 49 of them looked beautiful. But like they were all lined up in a row. But one of them was a little bit dented and a little bit crooked. And they were like, no, you got to kill that machine and ship another one. Mm-hmm. And we were like, yeah, but the machine works. It's fine. It's a little dent.
Yeah.
And they were like, if we can see the dent, how do we know that these machines are not dented inside, in the chips and the wiring and it was the most powerful story, because what he said to me was, the Japanese seek perfection, but once you achieve it and once you sign that deal, you will never lose that client, because they do deals for life, and they make sure that the risk is mitigated before they do the deal, and then you will have that client forever. And so that's just not the American way. The American way is, if it doesn't work later, call us up and we'll fix it later. Right? So
yeah. Or you're signing the contract thinking I can always go with another vendor as soon as this contract's up, or how can I get myself out of this contract if things go wrong? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, when I learned that, out of all my frustration, I found this really deep appreciation for the way they did it. And I loved it. It turned into frustration, from frustration to admiration. So I forget what your question was, but
what it taught you about people in the world. But I think that's a great story. That
put yourself into everyone else's shoes and understanding why they're asking what they're asking for. And that is not that is not a lesson in going to Japan or going to India or going to Singapore and doing business. That's a lesson in business. And yeah, it's exacerbated and much more intense if you go do it in another country. But if you can learn to do that here in your job as well, you'll be successful in America, doing business in America.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great insight. Myself, I have no idea what it's like to do business in Japan. It's just really interesting to get a look into that. Um, let's pivot though. Let's get to kind of present day, or as you're leaving Cornerstone on Demand. I want to kind of call back to how you have that client success framework. I mean, when you told me that, and you have this story behind you of all the success you had in building a company up as big as you built it. From my perspective, it seems like it may have made sense. Why not just go to another SaaS company, or why not consult SaaS companies and impart that wisdom on them? Why did you decide to go the wellness, the entrepreneurial, start your own venture route?
So first of all, I do consult other SaaS
Okay.
companies. I am an advisor. I'm on advisory boards, and I do consulting work on the side, not just in
Mm,
SaaS, but in new market entry. I'm consulting with two companies, Australian companies right now coming to America and Europe. Um, and I so I love that. That's just I kind of do that on the side. But my father was an entrepreneur, and I think I caught the entrepreneurial bug from him, which is build it. And even if I went to a company, to another SaaS company, I wouldn't go to, a $5 billion company. I would go to a Series A company and build it, because that's
yeah.
what I like to do. Once you get into the we're doing 250 million, 300 million, 400 million in ARR, I kind of get a little bit bored. Why did I
Yeah.
stay at Cornerstone? Because they were like, go start Asia. And that was from
Yeah.
zero. Right.
Yeah.
So, um, when I decided to I've always been a wellness junkie, a wellness connoisseur. I was an athlete in university, and kind of that's always been in my DNA. But and I've always been that guy, Connor, who like is curious about the things that are available, products, services, um, to support my well-being. And my friends, I remember like long before I started my wellness technology company, which is not just a technology company, but we'll get to that in a second. They used to make fun of me like, "Hey, we're doing this on Saturday. Can you join us, or do you have like services planned for yourself?" And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
going to the gym or doing cryo or getting some like IV drip or with some new NAD. So I was always that guy, and I when I left Cornerstone, I took a year and a half off. I was burnt out, by the way, which is a whole separate podcast.
Mm,
But I
yeah.
was really burnt out, and we were working on our strategy to go from a half a billion in ARR to a billion. That was that like kind of like the last chapter or act, the third act. And we were working on all that strategy, and my component was around the customer capabilities. After I came back from Asia, I became the chief customer officer of the company. And so I presented that strategy. I always say I created this beautiful strategy that I really loved. And I presented it and I resigned that evening,
Huh.
because I felt in my heart that I didn't want to execute it. I needed a break.
Yeah.
And it was really the first time, because I'm a perseverer. I'm like the guy who will just like keep going until he's dead. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is not serving me anymore. And so I decided to take my own well being into my own hands. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of cushion that I could take a little bit of time off. I knew I would do something next. I didn't know what it would be. And I happened to go to France for 6 months.
Hmm.
And I speak French, but I don't practice it. So I was going to French school. I was going to the beach afterwards. I was doing all these great things. Um, but my mind, I had a lot of capacity, mental, emotional, physical. like even capacity just for myself. And I'm like writing business plans on napkins on the beach, like every 3 days, like all these ideas. And
Hmm.
one of them I landed on, and that became Maavee. Maavee means my life in French.
Ah,
And
okay.
so not spelled this way we spell it, but said the way you would say it, Maavee.
Hmm.
And so basically, what I really started to discover about well-being, I wanted it to be in the well-being space, but I didn't know what it would be. I wanted it to be technology, but I didn't know what it would be. And that one napkin really turned into this notion of how do we as humans connect to and navigate our long-term, lifelong wellness journey. And so your journey is different than mine. Your needs, your interests, your desires, your context and environment, it's all different. And by the way, it's constantly changing. And so I started to think about and then research the consumer wellness industry. And I quickly found out that it's massive. The global consumer wellness industry is almost $5 trillion. That's the size of
Hmm.
Japan's GDP. And so, what does that mean? It means there's a market. It means that there's no silver bullet. There's all kinds of stuff out there, right?
Yeah.
It means that there's also a lot of good stuff and a lot of crap. And so my original notion was to help people to shop well, to be well, to curate the best wellness products and services, essentially to create a marketplace. But it very quickly evolved into I couldn't get away from the I didn't want to build a marketplace. I wanted to build a way to navigate a journey. And so I started to really think about how do you navigate a journey well? And what do you need? Well, you need education. You need content to support you and support you, educate you, inform you, inspire you, spark your curiosity. You need community and features for connection and support and nudging along the way. And you need the ability to shop well to be well. And so when you bring those three things together and unify them into an experience that helps you to navigate your own personal well-being, you get something really interesting. And so that's what we built. And our first go to market or our entry point into the market was with employers to offer this. So, by the way, we've curated about 1,000 products and digital services
Hmm.
that are the best out there in the world, and all our curation methodology is loosely mimics the principles of ESG. So we make sure that these brands that are bringing these products into the world have a visible commitment to the planet, to society, and to you, the consumer, meaning they're actually solving a problem. And so we bring all that together and you get this solution that's purposeful. It makes wellness more accessible because you kind of weed out the mess, and it makes it more personal. So you get to decide. And so we went to market first with employers, where employers, part of the solution is that there's a digital wallet where employers can put money
Hmm.
for you to spend on your well-being. And we tell the employers, we guarantee your money's well spent. It's spent by Connor. He chooses. It's spent on wellness. That's all that's in the solution. And it's spent with brands doing good in the world, making the world a better place. And so that was the first entry point into the market. But we quickly expanded the business model to be able to white label the platform to serve other authentic well-being or wellness related audiences that are not ours. And so our vision, we say to make it easy to discover the best of wellness wherever you are. You might not be our customer, you might be someone else's. And so I'll very quickly give you a really good example. Yesterday we announced to the world, we didn't push it out yet because it's a soft launch, but we announced to the world that Seeking Center, which is theseekingcenter.com, is a well-being media company founded by two former Oprah executives
Mm-hmm.
that are bringing a new media company into the world focused on living a holistic life. And their business model has three components to it, one of which is original programming that they will develop and license. So, a licensed and original programming to be delivered over socials, to be delivered over fast channels, which are free ad supported television. So, like your Freebies and your Tubies,
Mm-hmm.
like on your Samsung TV,
Yeah.
um, and on their digital platform. And their digital platform is us, branded the Seeking Center, looks like the Seeking Center, includes our marketplace of highly curated wellness products and services, includes their content and some products that they've curated. And so we have
Hmm.
lots of examples. We're in a bunch of deal cycles with really interesting companies, some other media companies as well that don't compete with Seeking Center. Seeking Center takes a bit of a more soulful, spiritual bent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but really interesting things that we're working on, again, to bring this platform to communities that are primed to be well or
Yeah.
seek to be well.
No, I think you summarized it really well. I like the value proposition. I like the go to market strategy. I'm curious, what is the, or a few examples of top selling items or programs through the marketplace? What are people
Uh,
most interested in?
well, let me tell you, because before we started this podcast, you said, "Oh, what would you recommend?" So I'll tell you a little bit of my story. To be honest,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I've grown up with my life journey is about learning to be well. I wouldn't say that I always had a physical wellness kind of interest, but I grew up with, and this is not a woe is me, but I grew up with high anxiety, low grade depression, but learned how to cope. Turned it into a superpower. But never really did anything about it. You probably are well aware that the world is in a mental health crisis right now, not just America. And COVID, didn't help, or I should say, did help. Actually, did help us to prioritize our well-being and our mental health. And one of the reasons I've constantly been exploring different aspects of well-being for a very long time is because I never really felt well. I was always seeking something to find happiness, to be quite honest. Um, and so when I started this company, one of my great joyful surprises was that I got to meet the creators of these products and services who
Mm-hmm.
had their own story to tell. And that's where I got really passionate about what we were doing. And one of the first people I met was Todd Steinberg. I met him in Florida. He had become a brand partner. He was available in the marketplace. We didn't even launch yet, by the way. We had about 100 brand partners with a PowerPoint and a dream. And that's all thanks to our team. That wasn't me. Our team that created these partnerships. But anyway, I was in Florida and I met Todd. And Todd told me the story of this beautiful um, piece of jewelry that hangs around your neck. It's a breathing tube. It's called Kamuso, which is a Japanese name. This looks like a piece of bamboo that's cut off at the end. I don't know if you've ever seen those fountains where the water comes out and there's a piece of
Yeah.
bamboo. Beautiful. It's got some Japanese writing down the side, which means Kamuso. And he had anxiety his entire life. He was on medication. He went to therapist after therapist. And he finally met a guy who said, "Listen, Todd, I want you to get off the medication. I want you to go get those little straws that they put in your drinks at bars that are too thin to drink through, that you stir with.
Yeah.
Cut them in half, put them in your pocket. Every time you feel anxious, put it in your mouth, breathe in through your nose, and blow through the straw for 2 minutes." And he says this is the only thing that helped him, saved him, in his
Hmm.
words. And he created this. It's with you all the time. lowers. I'm constantly using it because one of the things I found out, not only do I have anxiety, but when I type, I don't breathe.
Mm.
Many people that's true for, which is not healthy. So I
Hmm.
type and I put it in my mouth and I'm blowing through it. And I love it. So this is a story, like, if you go into our app, there's a little content nugget of like things that I recommend personally.
Yeah.
Another is this company, Kaibe. Kaibe, this is prebiotic support. It's gut health, and it's made from an ancient fruit that exists in Africa. This company is so amazing. Um, I don't know if you know this, but your gut, like everything starts in your gut, and it's actually connected to your mental health as well, not just your gut health, but your microbiome. And we have many
Yep.
microbiomes: our skin, our gut, our mouth, etc. The baobab fruit has been around for millions of years, obviously. It comes from those trees that you always see, like you see a picture of Africa and that beautiful tree. That's a baobab tree.
Yeah.
And this company, Dr. Luke Mace, is a naturopath doctor. He's been working on the gut and naturopathic medicine for 30 years. He's the founder of the Mays Clinic for Naturopathic Medicine in Santa Barbara. And he is the number one harvester of the baobab fruit in Africa, in particular in Ghana,
Hmm.
and has become the number one source of income for the Ghanaian culture, the communities that harvest it for them. And the vitamin C density, the probiotics, the microbiome benefits, weight loss, all these things that happen from this, it's amazing. And the funny thing is, I love them. They're a certified B Corp. They're like everything you could possibly be. And here's the thing, one of the things I want to leave with people. We, as, I don't want to just say Americans, but culture today generally, like, we want I want to take the baobab fruit powder and I want to like be able to like run a marathon tomorrow. Like, that's
Yeah.
not well-being.
Hmm.
Well-being is something you do for years. And you don't take baobab powder and like jump up and want to run a marathon. You have to support your microbiome, and sometimes you don't see the effects. But
Hmm.
when you're 60, you might look like you're 40. you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not making that claim about Kaibe, but I'm just saying, your well-being practices have to be things that you adopt for years, and they just need to be part of your life. And so I use so many things that just another one really quickly is I take these algae pills.
Hmm.
Algae is the most densely rich nutrient on the planet. It's sanctioned by NASA and the United Nations. They take it into space, like the astronauts eat algae. And
Hmm.
we have a brand partner called Energy Bits. It's founded by this woman. I call her the algae lady because if you talk to her, you would be taking algae for the rest of your life. You just listen
Yeah.
to her once and it's a done deal. All bets are off. But here's the thing. Again, I don't feel like I want to run a marathon after I take the algae pills. But every time I take the algae pills, in my mind, I feel like I'm doing something so good for me from the inside out that I get a happy jolt, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
So I think that's all part of it, is like really being thoughtful as you do it about why you're doing it. It's always about the why, you know? Like, one of my biggest lessons in life is this intention to know why I'm doing something in every situation. And that was a
Yeah.
hard lesson to learn. It took me 52 years, So I know that was a long answer to your question,
No,
but there are so many things. And if you could just really just be mindful of why you do these things and do them for a long time, you're going to see the benefits.
I like the parallel, or maybe to tie the wellness, or how you mentioned that it's a year, multiple year, a lifelong journey. And I think building a company or entrepreneurship is the same way, right? You're not getting the quick fix or the quick success. You tie that back to your experience in Asia, right? Yeah, the ups and
It's a
downs.
roller
So
coaster.
yeah, I mean, maybe we can, pivot to, okay, tie that wellness journey into what you're trying to build with Maavee. I mean, do you have specific goals, or how are you looking at this from a long-term lens and growing it? I mean, you talked about some really good stuff that you've been going on, the Seeking Center, focusing on employers. I mean, where do you see yourself taking this over the next several
Yeah.
years?
So we have two. It's a really good question, and I'll try to be really succinct about it. There are two aspects of our business model. There's going to market with Maavee as a brand, and there are two levels to that. The first is with employers, because we believe employers are committed and want you to be well. They know that if you're not well, you're not showing up your full self. They know if you're not well, you're not, maybe not even showing up. Like you might be
Hmm.
taken off, right? They know it.
Hmm.
So they're spending money on it. And we don't go in and say, all the stuff you're doing is not right. Use Maavee. Maavee is one of the tools in the toolkit. We always say, build your culture, set your values, put programs and practices in place, communicate well, cascade down, but give support to the employee to make their well-being journey a reality, which means time and money. So that's
Yeah.
bottoms up. And we say,
Yep.
let those meet in the middle. That's one aspect of our business under the Maavee brand. The second is in Q1, we'll be going direct to consumer so that Connor, you can
Hmm.
go download Maavee, jump in, um, access our marketplace, access our content. Community's not there yet, but it's coming soon. But you'll also be able to earn money, for doing things in the app and build your own build. So we do things to keep you engaged, but we want every human to be able to access it. So that's under the Maavee brand. Under what we call the Maavee Inside brand, that's other companies being able to white label it to serve their own audiences. That's embedding parts of our solution, like our marketplace, or white labeling the whole platform, like Seeking Center. So, what do we want to do? We want to make it easy to discover the best of wellness wherever you are. And so there are lots of places that could be true. Like, for example, next week, we're going to be in the CBRE tenant app,
Hmm.
for all tenants in the buildings of Century
Oh,
Park
wow.
in LA, 18,000 people. It's a perk, so they're embedding just the marketplace. And so wherever you are, if you're working in that building, great, go shop well to be well. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get as many lives on a wellness journey, and we're acknowledging that your journey is your journey, not what we tell you it should be. Second thing I want to say about that is we're not trying to reinvent mindfulness. Like Noom and Headspace and Calm have already done that.
Yeah.
We're not trying to tell you these are the 20 things you do to lose weight. Noom and Weight Watchers have already done that. We want
Yep.
to make those services discoverable to you at the moment that matters for you on that part of your journey, right? And we also don't want you to just say being mindful is Headspace. It might be Headspace and Camuso. It might be
Mhm.
Camuso and a weighted blanket in a dark room. We don't know. Discover, learn, and discover. And there's just as much power in learning what doesn't work as what does work, like life. We think life is wellness. That's why we called it My Life, Maavee in French. Um, Ultimately, what we're trying to do is scale and grow the business. And so, we're about to raise our first round of financing. We're going to go out. We've bootstrapped the company until now. We've got clients. We're punching way above our weight for what we've done so far, and the brand that we've built. But yeah, we've got to grow the company, and so the I will tell you, as you probably know, the capital markets are like it's a bloodbath out there right now.
Yeah.
But we made a really conscious decision to extend our runway and make sure that we could prove both aspects of our business model. to go raise real money, and so that's what's next: investing in growth. And then from there, we have a grand vision that we become a population wellness platform where insurance carriers want their insured on it, those kinds
Mhm.
of things where you're talking about real outcomes.
Yeah.
Because let me put the punchline on that. I don't know if I said it already, but well-being, wellness, the journey of wellness, and healthcare, they are very quickly merging together.
Yeah.
There is now enough data to suggest that being mindful is going to help you prevent disease. And so, what is United Healthcare doing? They're giving out headspace for free to their insured, hoping the hell you meditate, right?
Yep.
There's just the data is there to suggest that you being well, having strong mental health, solid mental health, having solid physical health, sleeping well, the data is real. It used to be woo woo stuff. Now the data supports it. And the reality is that healthcare companies are playing catch up because consumers are taking their well-being into their own hands.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, I know before we started recording, I let you know that I kind of work in that space. So,
Yeah.
let's just say I think something needs to be done, or there needs to be some sort of innovation or shakeup because, you know, the American
Well, look,
healthcare system
who's
is not working in its
and
current
who's
form.
going to win? Who's going to win healthcare? Amazon, Walmart. It's going to be a consumer company that
Yeah.
wins healthcare. Who should win healthcare? United Healthcare. And so,
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point about how traditional health insurance works is it's not really consumer driven, or the true cost of the care you're receiving is hidden behind a lower copay, and it's this opaque industry that needs to be disrupted, I think.
it does. Well, and look, there's a real place for managing disease.
Yeah.
That the healthcare is not going anywhere. Like, we need healthcare to manage disease, but we need something different to prevent it. And so that's where they're starting to really come together, and that's a good thing. Look, if you wanted to summarize what Maavee wants to do, our grand vision is to help that convergence happen faster.
Yeah. No, I like the grand vision, and something I've learned from you throughout this conversation is you think big and you go big. So I think
I
you will do
appreciate
big
that.
things with this. Um, I like to close with my guests. For anyone out there that's listening, they're thinking about starting their own thing, their own company, whatever it is. What recommendation do you have to someone thinking about entrepreneurship or jumping into that venture? Should you just go for it, or what advice do you have?
Yeah, look, if being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart, it's not for everybody. But if you are a visionary, you should explore that vision.
Hmm.
Whether you do it or don't do it, the first step is exploring it. Talk to people, get a couple get a couple people together who you think would be like the prospective buyers of your MVP, and
Hmm.
just talk to them. You have to be willing to talk. You have to be willing to hear that's a bad idea, which, by the way, does not mean don't do it. It means maybe the idea is this instead of this, or maybe it's this instead of this, or maybe
Hmm.
it's this, right? And so all of that shapes whether or not you should do it. And you shouldn't do every idea, but you should explore it. So that's the first thing. The second thing I say is when you decide to do it, you have to do it. And there's no like, I'm going to do it a little bit. You got to be in it to win it. You got to make incredible sacrifices of time and money because you're not getting paid, by the way.
Yeah.
So when you start your company, you're not getting paid. Um, and you need to bring others into it with you. There's no real reason to do it alone. If it's a good idea, You don't need to do it alone. I started out doing it alone, and I was like, I don't want to do this alone. And I found a co-founder who was as eagerly as committed as I was. And,
Yeah.
but you have to be committed to doing it. And then the third thing I would say is along the way, the roller coaster is real. Sometimes you feel like you should just be like, I'm just going to go get a job and get health insurance and get a paycheck and call
Yeah.
it a day, right?
Uh-huh.
And my only recommendation there, because maybe you should, maybe that's really what you need, but because what happens on the roller coaster is that you tend to lose sight of the vision and you get focused on the issue. Oh, we didn't win that customer. Oh, I don't have enough money to finish the MVP. Or oh, I just hired this person and they were with me for a year and I spent all this money and they left. And you can lose sight of your vision so quickly and get focused on that problem. You have got to keep focused on the vision, because if you go meditate, do whatever you need to do to remind yourself why you decided to do this, that's the only place the energy comes from, because the energy comes from you. You have to energize yourself, and if you're someone who can, you'll navigate. And by the way, there have been several times where I was like, I don't know if I should be doing this.
Yeah.
And someone, a good friend of mine said, why were you doing it to begin with? Tell me, explain it to me. And I told him, and he was like, did you hear the passion when you told me about the vision again? And I wasn't telling him about the problem, I was telling him about the vision. And
Yeah.
so if you can tell the vision story to yourself and get energized, you can tell it to anybody. And you'll find people to support you. They will come.
It's a good point. I think it's almost as if, expect the bumps in the road going in, but it's hard when they
I,
happen, even if you
the
have that
one thing I can
expectation.
promise you, they're going to be bumps. I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
promise.
well, Frank, hey, you've definitely imparted some wisdom on me, and so at a minimum, when I do these, I'm learning as well, and that's why I like doing it, is to broadcast this out to anyone else that can learn from them as well. So
I
again,
love
thank you for
that.
taking the time on a Friday evening. I will add, but let's close. I'll give you the floor. How can people find you and find out more about Maavee?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Frank Ricciardi, Ricciardi. You can find us at gomaavee.com, GOMAAV as in Victor, EE, Maavee. So we don't spell it the French way because the Americans were saying Maavee, but gomaavee.com. And or drop us a line at hello@gomaavee.com. And by the way, if any of your listeners want access, including you, Connor, to Maavee, right now it's gated, so you have to be invited,
Okay.
invitation only. Drop us a line, drop me a line, reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to give you access, hear your feedback, get us ready for our direct to consumer launch in Q1.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that offer for me and for the audience. And of course, I will put all of that info you just listed in the description. So, again, we'll close out here, but thank you. And I wish you the best of luck. Yeah, it sounds like you're going to do some big things.
I appreciate that, Connor. And, I just want to commend your desire to start this podcast and your desire to learn. When we first
Yeah.
talked, you told me, you want to learn as well.
Yeah.
And I love that, because that's what life's about, man. It's learning new stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.
Yeah. You too.
All right. See you, bud.